Good morning. And welcome to All Souls Unitarian Universalists. And congratulations on navigating around the cops and the joggers. On this very unusual August morning, if you're new to the area, I would caution you not to put away your summer clothes quite yet. We are not done. My name is Ruth Robarge. I'll be your moderator and overall person today because this is the Reader's Sampler. And among other things, I am the Reader's Coordinator. So the readers are in charge of the service rather than being the people who normally just get told what to read. They got to pick out their own pieces to share with you. So a little different service. I would want to take this opportunity to welcome any visitors that we have with us today. If you feel brave enough to introduce yourself, please stand, or if you brought somebody with you, stand up and give us an introduction. Well, there we go. Did you all hear that? They've lurked a few times. So welcome. Emerson is the boy, and what was your name, sir? Vin? Ben. Ben, welcome. Well, whether you're brave enough to stand or not, you are certainly still welcomed. We all are very happy we're all happy to be here this morning. Would you all please also take we also want to welcome the people who are joining us online. If you would do us the kindness of, check in on social media if you like, and then silence your phone. I did that this morning when I was having my coffee. I thought, very bad form for the moderator's phone to go ringing in the middle of the service. We normally don't do announcements, but there's a couple important ones that I think need to be addressed. One is we've lit the candle for Sister Pat Canoyer, who passed this week. Your insert in your program, in your order of service, say we didn't know when her memorial is. Well, Sister Pat Canoyer's funeral at the Loretto Mother House in Nernix, thank you, Kentucky, will be held Wednesday, the 28th of August at 5:30. It will be Skyped, or whatever, in a way that the Loretto members in Kansas City and anyone may watch it from the Science Lab at KC Academy at 7933 Main Street. Arrive about 5:15 to be on time for the beginning of the service. Announcements will be made later about a memorial service at All Souls. For information, see Jane Stover. I understand you also have this. Where's Jane? Wave your hand, Jane. If you want a copy of this, because you don't memorize everything I say. Remember Pat's love of All Souls and her dancing. She's a great dancer. Also, you may have received a survey on your way into church today. This is the Sunday morning survey. This summer we experimented with a different earlier schedule from our normal Sunday times. Today, you are handled the survey. Please share your experience and opinions on the summer schedule. The survey will be ongoing for a full month, covering 5 Sundays, with both the earlier summer schedule and after we return to our prior schedule. It will be printed in printed form and eventually available online, so we'll let you know when it's available online. If you fill out a survey and then find that you have more to offer, fill out another one. We ask that you put your name on the survey so that we can correlate the two, so we have a full picture of what people think and want and believe and all that good stuff. All right. Words of welcome. Welcome again. Throughout the year, the readers are assigned their readings. They are even assigned which Sundays they're going to read. They do a marvelous job, lending their voice, articulation, even sometimes animation, to the reading, to provide a deeper meaning and experience for us all. They may believe or agree with the reading, they may not. You'll never know, because they are good. Letting you make up your minds about that. Today, they are sharing with you their personal picks, an insight into their beings that they want to share with you. As we share this together, please open your heart, open your minds, and thank these people for their dedication throughout the year.
Hello. My name is Maya, and I light this chalice for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
Very nice. So please stand as you are able or willing, in mind or in spirit, and join as we confirm our covenant. Goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
You can be seated, please. On this day, 400 years ago, August 25th, 1619, the ship, the White Lion, arrived at Point Comfort near Hampton, Virginia. That British ship contained, among other things, more than 20 men and women kidnapped from West Central Africa, who were then seized by English privateers from a Spanish slave ship. While their legal status would remain complicated for more than a generation, it is believed they were regarded as stolen property and traded by the English sailors for food and supplies. This is the first recorded arrival of Africans in what would become the United States. Their forced arrival set into motion an important African imprint on every aspect of American society and culture, says Dr. Cassandra Newby Alexander, professor of history at Norfolk State University and co-chair of the 2019 Commemoration First Africans Committee. Moreover, she says, Africans' fight for freedom, equality, and inclusion has been transformative because it began our nation on its journey toward racial equality, something we are still working toward today. Our Unitarian Universalist faith community has made a commitment to be active in that struggle for equality and inclusion. We recognize that this anniversary marks a significant historical event, not only for African Americans, but for all Americans. It commemorates a major episode in the development of white supremacy culture in this nation. The National Park Service has invited houses of worship across the country, as well as other community partners and the public, to join the Fort Monroe National Monument in Hampton, Virginia, in ringing bells today to honor 400 years of struggle, survival, and resilience among Africans forcibly brought to these shores and enslaved. Since All Souls does not have a bell tower to be part of the simultaneous ringing at 3 o'clock this afternoon, we pause in our worship this morning to mark today's anniversary with 400 bell strokes, one for each year since that fateful day. We invite you to reflect on the gifts that the legacy of Africa has contributed to American culture, as well as the challenges and suffering that enslaved and oppressed people have endured here. And if the time begins to feel long, perhaps consider how long it must seem to wait 4 centuries for justice and freedom. Will you now rise and join in song?
I read Freddy the Frog 2 years ago in honor of All Souls getting to 150 years, and I'm going to read it again today in memory of Judith Walker Riggs, who is not our Reverend Judith. On that day, way back then, Freddy was just sitting on his lily pad all by himself. All the other frogs that Freddy usually played with were away, and oh, sigh, Freddy was bored. In fact, he was bored. And so Freddy decided to go exploring. And he hopped over to the woods, and beside the pond he started off, and he went by a lot of trees. Boring. And he hopped by a lot of stones. Boring. And he hopped by a lot of flowers. Boring. What was he going to do? Everything was boring. Well, then he saw this place over there. It was just gorgeous. It was wonderful, hard dirt circle. The perfect place to jump. Oh, Freddy was excited, and he went over there, and he realized that he was right in front of Farmer Brown's barn. And the barn was usually full of cows. And Freddy never went anywhere near there, because if one of them stepped on you, you knew it. Or rather, you didn't know it anymore. And so Freddy hopped over to the barn, and he peeked in. No cows, safe. Whoosh! So he went back out to the hard dirt circle, and he decided he would have a jumping contest all by himself. You don't need anybody else to have a contest. You just draw a line in the dirt, and you back up, and then you hop. Whop! And then you see if you get to the line. And you look where your feet were, and you draw a line a little bit further back. Back all the way back up, and see if you can do it. And then he went hop, and he went a little further, and he drew another line, and he did it. He really got himself all pulled together for this one. And he went hop, splash, right in a bucket by the door of the barn. Oh dear, he had landed in the bucket. And what was the stuff he was in? It was all white and slimy and thick. Oh, ick. Now, it was cream that Farmer Brown had been saving for his cats, but Freddy did not know that. What could he do? If he stopped kicking, he started to sink in this oily, white, thick, slimy sort of stuff. Freddy was very scared, but he did discover one thing. He discovered that if he kept on kicking and kicking and kicking, he could just keep his head up above the level of whatever that white, slimy, yucky stuff was. So he kicked and 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 he kicked. And that's how come it was that when Farmer Brown got home that day, he found a little pail of butter with one exhausted frog draped over the top. and the farmer lifted Freddie gently out of the bucket and put him on the ground. That night, on the ground, and Freddie crept away home. He could hardly bend his legs anymore. That night, as he was falling asleep, awful glad to be in his bed, a thought just flitted through his mind. He could barely catch it. It went by so fast. The thought just flitted through his mind. Sometimes it seems to be worth it to keep going, even if you aren't sure where you are or what this stuff is.
Thank you, Tori. Now we'll sing our children out so their classrooms.
I'm Don Dickey, and it is my task today to introduce the offering. And the offering today will be for our general budget. This is for the things that we do well and do together. Ideally, we would put all of our begs in one asket, and that one asket is our annual budget, our annual pledge. However, the reality is that one asket doesn't catch everything, and also circumstances change. So we come before you each week to remind you that to fund our values, we have to get up here and make a request. Today, I'm going to give you a challenge, the pizza challenge. In addition to what you have pledged, would you commit, at least in your mind, over the next year to take the price of one pizza a month and add that to what goes into the basket? That will mean we can more properly fund our values. The offering will now be given and very gratefully received. Please join me in the dedication of our offering to all the good works that it can help us achieve. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
Certain poems and passages over the years have become touchstones, and I dig them out when I find the occasion calls for them. If and when I suspect a habit is becoming a threadbare pattern or a dysfunctional rut, I reach for Edward Luter's tongue-in-cheek poem. Likely, we've all heard that little ditty that goes, "If you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got." Well, Luter's poem is the antidote for that. So, Your Poem Man by Edward Luters. Unless there's one thing seen suddenly against another, a parsnip sprouting for a president, or hailstones melting in an ashtray, nothing really happens. It takes surprise and wild connections, doesn't it? A walrus chewing on a ballpoint pen, 2 blue taillights on Tyrannosaurus Rex, green cheese teeth, maybe what we wanted least or most, some unexpected pleats, words that never knew each other until right now. Plug us into the wrong socket and see what blows, or what lights up. Try untried circuitry, new fuses. Tell it like it never really was, man, and maybe we can see it like it is.
Toni Morrison, who died this month, spoke at the Harvard Divinity School in 2012. There she explored how authors illuminate concepts of good and evil, and she examined the treatment of goodness in her own novels. I selected this reading from that speech to illustrate how someone already a wise, respected teacher and author continued to learn and evolve and offer insight into our values. Goodness, Altruism and the Literary Imagination by Toni Morrison. On an October morning in 2006, a young man backed his truck into the driveway of a one-room schoolhouse. He walked into the school, and after ordering the boy students, the teacher, and a few other adults to leave, he lined up 10 girls aged 9 to 13 and shot them. The mindless horror of that attack drew intense and sustained press, as well as later on books and film. Although there had been 2 other school shootings only a few days earlier, what made this massacre especially notable was the fact that its landscape was an Amish community, notoriously peaceful, and therefore the most unlikely venue for such violence. Before the narrative tracking the slaughter had been exhausted in the press, another rail surfaced, one that was regarded as bizarre and somehow as shocking as the killings. The Amish community forgave the killer, refused to seek justice, demand vengeance, or even to judge him. They visited and comforted the killer's widow and children, who were not Amish, just as they embraced the relatives of the slain. There appeared a number of explanations for their behavior, their historical aversion to killing anyone at all for any reason, and their separatist convictions. More to the point, the Amish community had nothing or very little to say to outside inquiry except that it was God's place to judge, not theirs. And as one cautioned, do not think evil of this man. They held no press conferences and submitted to no television interviews. They quietly buried the dead, attended the killer's funeral, then tore down the old schoolhouse and built a new one. Their silence following the slaughter, along with their deep concern for the killer's family, seemed to me at the time characteristic of genuine goodness, and I became fascinated with the term and its definition. Thinkers, of whom none was as uninformed as I was, have long analyzed what constitutes goodness, what good is good, and what its origins are or may be. The myriad theories I read overwhelmed me, and to reduce my confusion, I thought I would just research the term altruism. I quickly found myself on a frustrating journey into a plethora of definitions and counter-definitions. I began by thinking of altruism as a more or less faithful rendition of its Latin root, alter or other, selfless compassion for the other. That route was not merely narrow, it led to a swamp of interpretations, contrary analyses, and doubt. A few of these arguments posited widely different explanations. One, altruism is not an instinctive act of selflessness, but a taught and learned one. Two, altruism might actually be narcissism, ego enhancement, even a mental disorder made manifest in a desperate desire to think well of oneself or to erase or diminish self-loathing. Three, some of the most thought-provoking theories came from scholarship investigating the DNA, if you will, seeking evidence of an embedded gene automatically firing to enable the sacrifice of oneself for the benefit of others. A kind of brother or sister to Darwin's survival of the fittest. Examples of confirmation or contradiction of the Darwinian theory came primarily from the animal and insect kingdoms. Squirrels deliberately attracting predators to themselves to warn the other squirrels. Birds as well, and especially ants, bees, bats, all in service to the colony, the collective, the swarm. Such behavior is very common among humans. But the question being put seemed to be whether such sacrifice for kin and or community is innate, built as it were into our genes, just as individual conquest of others is held to be a natural instinctive drive that serves evolution. Is there a good gene along with the selfish gene? The further question for me was the competition between the gene and the mind. I confess I was unable and ill-equipped to understand much of the scholarship on altruism, but I did learn something about its weight, its urgency, and its relevance and irrelevance in contemporary thought. Keeping those Amish in mind, I wondered why the narrative of that event in the press and visual media quickly ignored the killer and the slaughtered children and began to focus almost exclusively on the shock of forgiveness. As I noted earlier, mass shootings at schools were perhaps too ordinary. There had been 2 such shootings elsewhere during the same time. But the Amish community's unwillingness to clamor for justice, vengeance, retribution, or even to judge the killer was the compelling story. The shock was that the parents of the dead children took pains to comfort the killer's widow, her family, and her children, to raise funds for them, not themselves. Of the victimized community's response to that almost classic example of evil, in addition to their refusal to fix blame, the most extraordinary element was their silence. It was that silence, that refusal to be lionized, televised, that caused me to think differently about goodness. Of course, thinking about goodness implies, indeed requires, a view of its opposite. I have never been interested in or impressed by evil itself, but I have been confounded by how attractive it is to others. I am stunned by the attention given to its every whisper and shout, which is not to deny its existence and ravage, nor to suggest evil does not demand confrontation, but simply to wonder why it is so worshipped, especially in literature. Is it its theatricality, its costume, its blood spray? The emotional satisfaction that comes with its investigation more than with its collapse. The ultimate detective story, the paradigm murder mystery. Perhaps it is how it dances, the music it inspires, its clothing, its nakedness, its sexual disguise, its passionate howl, and its danger. The formula in which evil reigns is bad versus good, but the deck is stacked because goodness in contemporary literature seems to be equated with weakness, as pitiful. For instance, a girl running frightened and helpless through the woods, while the pursuing villain gets more of our attention than her savior. Evil has a blockbuster audience. Goodness lurks backstage. Evil has a vivid speech. Goodness bites its tongue. Don Dickey speaking now. This is only the first part of that talk. There's much more to this address to the Harvard Divinity School. It is a worthwhile read.
Yeah, please stand now and join us in singing Blue Boat Home.
Remembering my place. Today I swam by a white-tipped reef shark. I was the alien in this situation. He watched me with cool nonchalance. Certainly not how I watched him. Reminded me of the need to pay attention to the yard I'm passing through. Shame. Through tears and shaking voices, their stories were shared of the tragedies that made them leave, the suffering along the way to a destination of cages and cells. I didn't know they were separating children from their parents. Tears streaming, hands shaking, she left to protect him his life threatened. No reason not to believe. Give me your tired, your poor. Let them go to maximum security prison. Your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, and he ends up in a dog cage. No lamp lifted, no golden door. Still another shares her testimony with equally powerful emotion, but little variation in the welcome. The mother of exiles is shamed, a nation of immigrants with amnesia, forgetting ancestors who traveled here, suffering, hopeful, believing this was the land for a better life, now refuses them, a refuse no more. The greatest cheat. Tomorrow is living's greatest cheat, offering up a promise it's not prepared to keep, tricking all us mortals, an illusion so seemingly sweet. Catch up with you tomorrow, let's calendar something soon. Plan that trip another year, lunch for sure next week. Oh, such foolish humans, with frontal cortex unique, mindlessly seeding a joy today for a myth riddled with leaks. Necessary darkness. If it were all light, all sweet, all happiness, that would become mundane, routine, unremarkable. It's the contrast that catches the eye, grabs attention, pulls in focus. The stars would forever be invisible without the beauty of darkness. Privileged ignorance. Every one of them Hispanic, easy to know as their conversations in lilting Spanish were audible all around the house, a crew replacing the siding. Job about 4 weeks, every day here around 8, but noise of work not starting until 8:30, letting us sleep in peacefully, but forcing them to miss the coolest hours for work. Missouri August is hot. Break for lunch at 1, finishing the day at 8. This past Monday, they started late, and in passing, I wondered why. Today, the foreman doing last bits of work was visible out my windows. I'd talked with Edmund several times. Every concern he addressed, every question answered with patience and a quick, handsome smile. And finally, it struck me 4 days late. As I watched him through the window, he was making sure my home was perfect. The shootings, one Saturday, one Sunday. His people had been the targets because they were brown, only because of brown. Men just like him, gentle, hardworking, his family, his friends, the whole work crew, it was their people slaughtered. And Monday, I wondered, why the late start? Approaching tranquility. Lying on the floor by the open deck door, listening to gentle rain in the darkness, cool air softly brushes my skin, banishing cares of the day.
Two years ago, I read the following excerpt as part of our sesquicentennial celebration. Judith Walker Riggs served All Souls as minister from 1986 to 1991. Today, I read it in honor of her passing on July 8th of this year. This is excerpts from a sermon that she preached at All Souls in September of 1987. She had just participated in a protest and civil disobedience against nuclear testing. There we were, 6:30 in the morning. We were about to try to enter the town of Mercury. It had been a shock to realize that in this chartered town, in the state of Nevada, USA, you could not come or go without a pass. Yet here we were, and some of us were planning to go in anyway. We started down the road, about 200 of us. There were the guards. There waiting for us also were the counter-protesters. They had their campers with canvas porches parked right there, with their lawn chairs for comfort. They also had their voices and their posters and their flags. We had planned a silent vigil as the workers arrived. Unfortunately, UUs so concentrate on individual freedom that we forget there might be any benefits to discipline and cooperation. And we even lose the knack of it. UUs wandered around. They talked with each other. They cheered a clown. They sang songs and generally acted as if they were at a party. I wish we had remained silent and motionless, for then what a contrast we would have made to the counter-protesters. For they never stopped screaming and waving and jumping about. They waved their American flags. They yelled constantly, harshly they yelled. A favorite was more nukes, less pukes. The pukes being us, of course. The workers come through a gauntlet like this nearly every day. That day, about a quarter of them waved encouragement to the counter-protesters. One bus rider waved a big red sign with black letters at us. Treason, it said. And about a quarter of them waved at us and flashed their peace sign out their windows. After a worship service, we set off for an act of civil disobedience. We headed for the crossing point, a cattle grid in the middle of the road. It was really a people grid to keep us out. But the security guards had laid a board across it so we wouldn't sprain our ankles, and also so that we'd only come over one by one. But some weren't going to cross the grid. They were going through the barbed wire fence across the desert to be arrested by motorcycle police. Or they were going to lie down in the road and block traffic to the test site. Or they were going to be support people for the rest of us. We set out towards the grid, singing the hymn we will sing this morning, "We are a gentle, angry people." The counter-protesters yelled and screamed in our ears. It was bedlam. We looked and walked straight ahead, singing. As Bill Schultz, UUA president, began to cross the line, the sheriff met him. He gave Bill official warning. The sheriff's face was gentle and concerned, not cynical, not enraged. We acknowledged that we heard and understood him, and one by one we crossed the plywood bridge. As soon as we were across, guards handcuffed us with white nylon handcuffs like extra-large hospital bracelets. We climbed awkwardly, without the use of our hands, into converted, un-air-conditioned ex-school buses for the ride further into the test site, to the booking station. The station is surrounded by a large fenced-in corral. The corral, like the cattle grid, was not for animals, but for people. If we would agree to stay in the corral, they would remove our handcuffs. The hardest part of the morning now began. The sun was very high. It was long past the time we thought it would all be over, 10:30 a.m. I was in the holding pen till nearly 12:30. No umbrella, no water. One by one, we went in, presented our IDs, received our citations, a fine of $260, or appearance in court. We were then released, put back on the old buses, and driven to a spot about a city block from our buses. Once upon a time, people confronted each other with naked emotion in protests. You don't do it like that anymore. Oh, the counter-protesters screamed at us, but they were very careful not to actually touch us. And the organizers of the protests are in constant dialogue these days with the sheriff's office. These things are carefully planned to minimize danger to anyone. But many of us that day had mixed feelings about that. I mean, it was more like a minuet than a protest. Everything went according to plan. A little suffering in the sun to make us feel like we'd paid the cost, but no real danger. A little emotional confrontation from the counter-protesters, but not too much. So that was my week in modern protest, in a carefully choreographed dance, a carefully scripted play. Was it all a waste of time? Not really. Some court officials, deputies, guards, have even confided to the organizers that meeting and hearing the protesters has changed what they believe. The steadiness of the protests, day by day, convinces many that there is a lot of desire in this country to stop these tests. As for me, I learned a lot about myself, about protesting, and about the world. Oh, I still face a world in which testing goes on. And perhaps the most profound lesson for us all, as Bill Schultz pointed out in his report to the General Assembly, was the humanity of everyone involved. The workers, the guards, the deputies, the counter-protesters. We must never lose sight of that, because cherish our individuality as we do, we have to build a world with those people across the road. We don't have to like the way they manifest their fear any more than they like the way we manifest our righteousness. But like it or not, we have to build a world together. And the only way to build a world together is to find beneath all the rhetoric and rancor some common vision, some common trust, some common care. Whatever your opinions or activities, let us all together never lose sight of that. We have to build a world with all those people across all the roads.
So stand now. Please stand and sing. Please be seated. So there you have the reader's sampler. What is goodness? Are you ready to make some changes in your life? Knock out some of those old ideas, the threadbare ones? And we are living in a world still of injustice. And we do have voices, and we do care. So I'm going to extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, not the fire of commitment. Those you take with you. Take them, do good.